When it comes to wedge, while you're in any shape, you can just use the shape drop down and just convert it to wedge by just checking the wedge box. Right now we're using Boxcutter 718.3, which is an older release, but in order to show where we've gone with wedge, it's important to go back to the past for a moment. So I've drawn this wedge and I've tabbed it to pause. And every time you move the draw dot, if you bring it in too much, the wedge will do this sort of auto calculation that would kind of disrupt the wedge that you have. So as a result, I would always have to press S and Y in order to scale it on the correct axis, like you're seeing me do here, in order to get a smaller wedge. But anytime I would try to adjust the draw dot, the wedge would manipulate, which was something that would drive me crazy. Most of the time I would just use wedge like you see me doing here, where I just draw the wedge and just call it a day. However, let's create something a little more advanced with our wedge. So in order to exit wedge, I'll just press W. And we could press B and add a bevel, press spacebar, and press 1, and we'll select the active object and perform another cut. And with this interesting cut, we'll just draw a box around it. And we'll press Y in order to change this to an extraction, and clicking, we now have the extraction. We're now in Custom Cutter. So if we draw a custom cut, we can see that we're just placing it on the surface, and we're able to rotate it using R. We're able to drop it and extrude it to 1:1 holding shift. We can also press W and wedge it. In fact, pressing W multiple times will allow you to change the type of wedge that you're receiving. However, pressing shift tilde will rotate the shape and the wedge at the same time, and this is actually undesired and was something that we needed to rectify over the course of the next releases. So that's where this latest update comes in, is improving the behavior with using the draw dot with wedge, and also improving the ability to rotate the shape inside independent of the wedge. So we just minimize Blender. We're now over in the present 718.6, and we're still on box. And with our hotkeys showing, if we just draw a box, we see that the hotkey of W allows us to quickly change this to a wedge. And if we pause this, we can now grab the drag dot or drag the draw dot, and we're able to now adjust the wedge without it actually doing any sort of flipping action, which was just undesired. It was a bit of an overstretch. Sometimes we try to make things smart and they work against us. This is one of those cases. Another thing that was also resolved was the ability to have it rotate inside. So let's just create the same custom cutter as before. This one's like a kind of test shape I always experiment with as a custom cutter. And now that we've brought this out, we can just draw a shape around it. Press Y to extract, and we've extracted it. And let's just draw our shape holding shift, and we'll just bring that out, bring it over to the side, and let's just press W to wedge it. And now when we press shift tilde, we see that the shape is rotating inside, but the wedge is actually remaining perfectly static. And this is because we need to deal with the wedge axis independently of rotate inside, which is delegated to either shift tilde or shift R if you're not a tilde using user. But this is a massive improvement for wedge and rotate inside. Rotate inside was supposed to not get confused and tied up with wedge. And every time I saw it, it just made me feel bad. But now I'm happy to announce that wedge and custom cutter now behave properly as far as rotate inside is concerned. And when it comes to wedge and dealing with this axis, we'll be adding fine options for that in an upcoming update. But for now, you can just press W in order to cycle the wedge. And then if you're needing to actually rotate to a different side, you can actually just rotate it and still use shift tilde to rotate inside. So we now have that independent control back. We just need to get it implemented for wedge as well.